Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast. I'm Stevie Collier, and I am a G because I have just released a new series for the first time in a freaking year, and I am here with my co-presenter, Andy Peliquin, and man, I am rocking this intro, and I think it's the glasses, the beard, and the man bun in the back. I'm just a new person. That's what it is. I'm just cooler. I feel like, well, I was going to make this sexual in the first 30 seconds, but I'm not. Because I'm a gentleman.
Stevie, you make everything sexual, and that's the only reason that I keep you around for this podcast.
Because I'm a sex fiend. I'm a nympho.
Yeah, it was funny actually. Yesterday we did the special episode for indie fantasy addicts, and the whole time I was thinking, man, where's Stevie to insert snarky comments the whole time?
Dude, I want to start getting in on those Tuesday podcasts. Angel, offered it to me. I didn't know if what you wanted to do, but dude, I whenever y'all want me to. But last Tuesday was Mother's. I'm not a mother. I haven't written a mother. Well, actually, I have, but I was with my mother when that was going on. So
no, that was a fun one though. I got to talk up Alana a little bit. That was nice.
Alana. Oh, you got to talk about Alana.
Yes.
Okay, dude.
The most badass mother of all. I mean,
God,
in my opinion,
a rough story.
She does.
She's got a rough story.
But it makes it so much more awesome when she comes out of it as the total badass that she is.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta ask, did you get any flack for it? Any like pushback from it?
I still get a lot of, or not a lot. I get occasional, 1-star, 2-star reviews for the, for the rape scene at the end of book 1 because it is really brutal. It was written brutal. It was intended to be brutal, and so I still get bad reviews saying it's you shouldn't include this. But I have thought about it. I'm considering. I will be relaunching the series later this year. I've got a cover for book 1, and I have seriously considered taking out that scene so many times. And I've talked to people about it, and I asked them, should I take it out? And they all say that no, because it's so organic to the person that she needs to become for the story to work. So I thought of fading it to black. I thought of so many ways to do it, but that scene, it's just necessary for her story. So it's a hard one to have to write, to force people to read.
Hey Dale, welcome to the podcast, man.
I finally made it. Sorry, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We're just chalking it up to technical difficulties.
Yeah.
It's a good way to take us out of our current discussion.
Do I even want to know?
Rape, but yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ. What did I get in the middle of?
but no, it wasn't a very well, I don't know if that could ever be art. Yeah, it's artistic because okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. We're talking about decisions when coming to books that, scenes in books that it's half and half. And I was thinking we're talking from a marketing point of view. But Dale, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stevie.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm Dale Lucas. I am the author of several books that are available. The main ones that people might know me from are my offerings from Orbit. It's the Fifth Ward series, which started with First Watch in 2017. And then Friendly Fire came out in 2018. And this summer, the third book, Good Company, will be out on August 27th. So...
Now I have to ask.
I was just about to ask this.
Was Terry Pratchett's City Watch series in any way responsible for the creation of this story?
It actually was not. I was aware of it because when I first got the idea, I always do this when I get an idea, I go looking to see if there are any other examples of it out there. And that won't necessarily stop me right off the bat. I'm mainly trying to make sure that something isn't totally, like ground that's been gone over again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I ran across the Terry Pratchett, the Night Watch series, and I know who Terry Pratchett is, and I know the kind of fantasy he writes. And I was like, okay, I know I'm definitely not doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
So whatever Terry Pratchett did, I'm sure it's awesome. But I know that mine is different than that. And I still see reviews from time to time where people are like, well, I was hoping this was going to be like Pratchett's Night Watch, but it's just not like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no.
Whoa.
You know, I too have thought about writing that, just because I mean I loved the City Watch series, the Guards
Yeah.
Guard, all of them. They were just so good, so genuine, so Terry Pratchett essentially.
Yeah.
And so I thought of writing my own, but every time I do, I always think I will never be this good. You know, I will never match up to Terry Pratchett. So
Well,
I've gone another way.
yeah, the key is to just know that you're not trying to occupy that niche. You know, I knew that I wanted to do something that was a little more straightforward. I mean, there's humor and stuff in it, but it's definitely not meant to be satirical or funny. Sometimes I sort of joke that it's like grimdark light.
Nice.
You know, it's got dirt under its fingernails, and it can be bloody and heavy and dark sometimes, but it's not meant to be like oppressively so.
Is it like a straight up like murder mystery police procedural?
Pretty much, yeah. That was my basic. If you guys have ever read any police procedurals like the Ed McBain, the 87th Precinct series, that's a series of books that were written between like the 1950s and the early 2000s when Ed McBain finally died.
Wow.
He was just writing them for years and years and years, and something like that, or something like The Wire, or something like Hill Street Blues or NYPD Blue. That emphasis on the daily drudgery
Yep.
of keeping the peace somewhere. It just happens to be in a pre-industrial, you know, sort of a fantasy city with humans and orcs and elves and dwarves in it.
I like it's kind of a slice of life story. Like, is it big, epic, world-shattering stakes?
No, actually, again, that's I specifically went in the other direction. I was like, this is going to be the story about the guys who are just doing a job every day. And they may find things that are big and heavy in the context of their world and their city that they occupy.
Yeah.
But I specifically didn't want them going off on quests for, you know, world destroying artifacts or fighting dark lords with massive armies that you don't know where they came from or how they're funded. Yeah, I tried to do that every day. And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the series is the way you get to know the city. The city becomes a character in and of itself. You get to have the little like sort of supporting characters in the background who pop up, like the other watchmen at the watch keep, and the folks that Rim and Torvald, the main characters, meet as they go through their daily rounds and stuff like that. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
I think for me, reading that in the City Watch series, it wasn't just, you know, Sam Vimes, the main character. There were the background, and sort of like there was one sergeant who was really fat and another one who was super skinny. And, you know, one of them was super lazy and the other one was just an absolute idiot, or, you know, just things like that. Yeah. These little moments of humanity that make you connect with the characters. And then, you know, when they visit the same, you know, thief that they've caught 3 times, and, you know, he's the CI that they press for information. It's almost like reading a police procedural, which, I mean, it's still probably the most popular genre on TV, really.
Exactly.
But in a fantasy world, I think that's something that would really appeal to a lot of people. Have you found that, like, police procedural mystery thriller readers pop over to fantasy for that, or is it pretty much exclusive fantasy?
I haven't really run into any so far, but I'm sure they're probably out there somewhere. I'd like to hope that they're out there, because that's exactly the kind of person I'd like to draw in, is the person that is willing to give fantasy a try, but that maybe they want something that's a little more approachable. They don't want to get thrown into the deep end with something. That's the same reason that I wrote the books. Even though there's sort of character progression from each one to the next, I wanted each story to be self-contained. I wanted them to feel like episodic, or, you know, you're coming back 6 months later to see how these guys are doing, things like that. They don't necessarily have to run one right into the other.
Gotcha. Now, to lead into the topic of discussion for the day, how did you come up with this idea? What sparked it?
Okay, well, the story I always tell people is that at the time I had just moved back here to Florida after spending a few years out in California, trying my darndest to get somewhere as a screenwriter and failing miserably. So I had a lot of movie ideas in my head, and one of the things I had been toying around with for my last year out in California was trying to find a way to sort of modernize or put a twist on the classic, like a buddy cop movie. The kind of stuff that a lot of guys of my generation and probably your generations, I don't know, you guys might be a little younger than me.
A little bit.
Yeah. But, the stuff we grew up with, 48 Hours and Lethal Weapon and, Bad Boys was actually a late thing, but stuff like that. So I'd been messing with that notion and what to do with it. I was back here in Florida, this is saying, okay, I'm not going to write scripts anymore. I'm going to go back to concentrating on writing books. And yeah, just one day while I was at work, this notion came to me of these two guys walking the streets with their lamps. It was like just that image of the two guys on these shadowy, dark streets and with their lamps. And I was like, oh, that's it. Like the cop buddy movie, but in like Minas Tirith, in a definitely fantasy setting. And instead of running around this world seeing what's in every corner of it, like we get to really dig into this place and see what's going on there. And have these two guys constantly, they're the best of friends, but they're at each other's throats as well.
Of course, like any good buddy cop.
Well, of course, yeah.
And that's what I love about today's discussion is that the like I put the title was random plus random equals awesome, because that's really how it happens.
Yes, absolutely.
The idea for my assassin character came from reading a book that I loved, but it wasn't until I watched an episode of Criminal Minds that I came up with the idea to give him this voice in his head that drives him to kill, and thus was born this massive world-changing storyline that I would never have come up with had I tried to focus on the assassin. And some random person decided to do jigsaw puzzles, swords, and dinosaurs, and somehow he made that come to life.
Wow.
Wait. Compliment. Yeah. It kind of actually, I just changed my bio to I write books that are like my personality, which most people would say are eccentric, weird, strange, unique, and then bizarre is right in the series.
Yeah,
so
that's what we do, man. We're full of all kinds of crazy stuff.
I was just tired of trying. I mean, I love writing for readers, I do, but I wanted to write a series that if I were in Barnes and Noble, I would pick up and want to read and make it. Because when I read Kings of the Wild and I saw Nicholas Eames, he was like, it felt like he was writing for himself.
Oh,
something
totally.
He always wanted to write. I wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And today I learned that really was true, because my editor said, hey, Stevie, I don't think it's cool for you to put an AIDS joke in your book. So that is a true story, and it pissed me off so much because it is hilarious. I mean, I don't think AIDS is funny, but I think what was said was funny. Which you think, like, how could AIDS be funny?
No. It's all about context.
I'm actually letting the editor go, not only because she doubled her prices, but at one point and I'm not telling you the name, I'm not trying to be hateful or anything, but at one point she highlighted a paragraph and in the comments put, "I hate this." And I was like, oh, you are not a kind person.
Well, you could always look at it as, did she hate it because you wrote something that was so heinous and dark and unfortunate that it's like, ooh, I really moved the reader there. Or she just hated it.
She didn't like the idea behind so there's a boyfriend girlfriend thing, and I didn't mean it as, because I said he belonged to Finn or she belonged to Finn. I didn't mean it as like she was meat and he owned her. I meant like, like their boyfriend girlfriend, like she would own, like she belonged to him, they're mates. And she took it from a feminist point of view, which I'm fine with feminism, but come on. And I had to email her to ask her what she meant by that, and it's just a waste. But anyway, yeah, so the AIDS thing got me laughing though.
Well, and you bring up a good point, which is the whole like writing for yourself versus writing for an audience. And I think it's best when you do a little of both. You have to start from a place of you're writing for yourself. When you're first writing the story, when you're first trying to find the shape of it and trying to get it all down, and that's got to come right out of you, and you can't waste a lot of time editing yourself on that. Later on, when you get some beta readers, you get an editor, every now and then you might want to listen to what they say.
Yeah.
Every now and then I love it. But anyway, swinging back to the topic at hand, Stevie, how did you think of Jigsaw, dinosaurs, and magic swords? Like, how did that come together?
Dude, so easy. I know the answer to this. I was walking with my brother. It was mid-June last year. No, it was May, like the last few days of May. And we're talking about The Dark Assassin because it was falling off. It was falling off in popularity. And he's like, "You're gonna write a new series." Like, "Oh yeah, I definitely am." He's like, "You should write one about dinosaurs." And I said, "Yeah, I could do that." Because my brother just the letter A, he's going to college to get his PhD in paleontology. It's like, you know what? Dinosaurs haven't been done except for by Victor Milan, who it coincidentally got a lot of bad reviews for his rape scenes. But there's a lot, apparently. My brother read it and he was like, "Oh my God," because it's a dinosaur thing. But anyway, back to rape. Why can't I stop talking about rape and AIDS?
Dear God, Stevie, what are you doing?
It sounds like a cereal, rape and AIDS. Anyway, Jesus. And we're talking dinosaurs. And I was like, you know what? But how can I make this my own? I was watching an anime called My Hero Academia. And it was all about people getting random abilities. And this could be from fire coming out of your fingertips to growing 100 feet, or you could lift like a pencil into the air. You never knew what you were going to get. So I had this idea to give this weak character a really crappy blade that turns out to be amazing once you got used to it. And I put into this world tons of blades all over. There's one story where, so that's where the idea came from. But funny story about one of my favorite blades, the growth blade. Kingdoms fought for this blade because they thought it would make their member grow larger. They fought and they killed and they had armies go after it. And one king finally got it, and it was called the growth blade, but it was the reverse growth that they were looking for.
Oh dear.
Yes, yeah.
I think I remember reading that one.
Yeah, and I thought that was hilarious. You can guess what my editor said about it. I did keep it in the story. But yes, I've always had I'm not trying to say I'm like the funniest guy in the world, but I've always had a unique sense of humor. It's pretty dark. It's pretty gross. Sexual, I would say. I'm a kid who never grew up, and I saw some of it in Nicholas Eames. I was like, you know, I'm going to take this as far as I want to. What would I think was funny? And that's how I came up with the Jigsaw Blade series. The Bizarre is in the series for a reason. The Bizarre Blade series. It's very strange, different, and I think it's a unique voice. But yeah, that's how I came up with the story of the Bizarre Blades.
You know, I was reading an article a while back about trying to teach AI's imagination and how there's no way to give a machine that runs on pure logic any sense of imagination and creativity. And this is exactly the thing that I came up with.
Yeah. Random plus random.
You program them to take two random things and find some way to connect them somehow, some strange pattern, whether you mesh them up or, you know, you do the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever it is. And they do that over and over and over again until they come to understand how the human brain and the creativity and imagination can make these connections. And by doing that, by programming this algorithm, obviously I know nothing about computer programming. So I can't really explain how they would do it. But if that could be done, if they could teach a computer to connect these two random ideas somehow in a way that would make sense, like Stevie did with magic swords and dinosaurs, like you did with fantasy worlds and cops, like I've done with bank heists and fantasy thieves, or, you know, like every author does. There's some way that they take something familiar and makes it totally new, or something totally new and foreign and makes it familiar. By teaching those connections, or teaching a computer to look for the ways to make those connections, you could essentially program creativity and imagination into a machine.
Yeah, theoretically, that sounds like that would probably work, because that's essentially how our brains work. Our imaginations are basically all of those random associations floating around and bumping into each other. Or sometimes being called upon at a moment's notice to connect, one way or another.
Dale, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had a question that I really don't want to leave me, but are you a cop or a firefighter? No. So you're okay. You're a writer.
I get asked that a lot, and actually, one of the best compliments I got on first watch was a guy who is a former Baltimore City police officer, a retired Baltimore City police officer, found me on Facebook and messaged me, and he told me, he's like, man, you really get it. Like that combination of like boredom and routine, and then, oh shit, suddenly something crazy is happening. And that's exactly what I go for. I know I do have a day job. It's pretty boring and low key, and I don't really talk about it. But that's my whole thing. Is I try, whatever I'm doing, I try to bring a sense of realism and sort of a grounded reality to it. And I guess since I am a civil servant and I work in a bureaucracy, then I talking about bureaucracies is something that always comes naturally to me. You know.
Yes, that's something that pretty much every one of us can relate to. It's so easy to make them
Yeah.
and it's actually kind of fun because you can take an entity like the DMV or the like for example, Zachary Pike's Orconomics. He took the thing that we all are so familiar with, the banking system, and he made this weird, amazing thing out of it. And all of a sudden it becomes something totally fresh and new that he can just take weird places and makes it more fun. He can take this familiar concept to all kinds of weird angles.
Yeah, there you go, with the two random things like colliding with each other again. And I was earlier when I was making some random notes about the topic that we were going to talk about tonight. The thing I kept coming around to was like form and function, form and function, form and function. The idea that often what you're doing is taking the form or the aesthetic or the feel of one thing, and you're melding it with the desired effect or the functionality of something else. So I'm taking the form of a fantasy story where you've got people running around in grubby armor and chainmail and with swords and such, and melding it with the functionality of a cop, a police procedural. And that's how that's how those magical things happen, is by putting those two crazy things together that you didn't think would go together.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so fun to see the things that you come up with when you start writing. It can often be a struggle to look for these things, but the more you write, I mean, I think I'm working on book 22 now, 23. And it just comes naturally. Just the things that you come up with as you write, like you don't even have to look for them anymore. As an example, one project I was working on, it was the different types of elemental magic. And I think no one in the world has ever done this before. Massive tidal wave coming to destroy the world. The guy used his ice magic to create a wedge to cut, through the wave and disperse it to stop the thing from being destroyed. Or, just stuff like that. You just think about these things in the moment as you're creating them. Your brain is so accustomed to making these associations.
Exactly.
That they just happen, and then you follow the thread. You keep tugging on the thread more and more, and it just keeps leading you down new and amazing paths that you just blow your mind. Like in the latest book that I published, Ascension of Death, the 5th and final book of the new series, I did not go into it expecting to solve the world-shattering problem from my other series. But the second to the last chapter, I wrote this thing, and I'm like, holy shit, this is going to amazing places. And it was just like, it totally took me by surprise. I had not planned it, and it just blew my mind. It was the greatest holy shit moment I've had since realizing that I could have my thief hire my assassin and connect the two series.
I love how stuff like that happens. Yeah, that's a great feeling when all of that stuff comes together like that. That's so cool. I actually used to, just for fun, I've never been good with short stories. I've written some, I've published some, but they're definitely not the form I am most comfortable in, just because it's such a small space to work in. I don't like small spaces.
Right.
But I have in the past, in an effort to try and help generate ideas, I've literally done like making a bunch of little slips of paper with things on them. And I'll do like one with a bunch of potential characters and one with a bunch of potential settings and then one with a bunch of potential like MacGuffins or situations or whatever. Just randomly pull them out and then go through the exercise of whatever you pull out, like you were saying with the computer earlier, find a way to connect them. Like, how do those things all hang together? What can you do with that?
That's pretty cool. I do that a lot with like random story idea generators on the internet.
Yeah.
Whenever I find myself, all right, what am I going to do with this series? I'll just hit, generate ideas. I'll find, a big long list. 95% of them are going to be garbage. And then there's going to be that one
Precisely.
that sparks an idea. And it's just like,
yeah,
light bulb moment. And that's what makes the human mind and imagination and creativity so amazing, is that it can find these connections between things that you would never have thought about before. I mean, the truth is, when it comes down to it, I could never write the Jigsaw blade. Even if Stevie told me, all right, here's the plan. These are all of the Jigsaw, these are all the bizarre blades, and here's the dinosaurs you can play with. My story would go a totally different route than his, because my brain connects things in different ways. Same if you told me, all right, you've got these two cops, they live in a fantasy world, here's what their mission is going to be for the first book. It would be a totally different story. And that's what makes every new story so amazing.
Yeah, and that's why I try to tell and other folks who want to get into writing, or younger writers, when they worry about their ideas getting stolen, I'm like, you don't really have to worry about that so much, because even if somebody takes your idea and runs with it, what they're going to do is not what you would do.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't be. When you start with a kernel of something and build from there, everybody's brain works a different way, and they're all going to come to different, different ends ultimately for that. So, I think it's amazing the way that happens. And even just another one of the things I'm big on is research. I do a lot of reading, nonfiction reading and research related reading. Part of it is to talk from a place of authenticity and knowledge about certain things. But part of it is also because I know that the more I read on a certain topic, I'm going to find little nuggets that are going to help me.
Yep.
Always going to find little things that will give me entire ideas for stories or characters that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, when I was writing my Queen of Thieves series, I actually bought a book on burglary. It's like the psyche of a burglar. A famous master cat thief wrote this book and published it about what it means to be a burglar. And just reading that, it didn't inform the directions the story went as much, because there was still the big ups, the downs, the stealing from the big bad guy, fighting these peoples, but just it subtly influenced the character's approach to everything, to the point where it almost did end up changing the story, or it changed her approach to the problems that I wanted to throw at her. The solutions I had originally changed because of the information that I gleaned. So I'm right with you there. The more I don't know, the more excited I am, because then I throw myself into research, and then I walk out and I feel like, okay, now I'm going to use this that I know from this series to write this next series and change it in an interesting way, and take, random associations that make things all the more interesting.
Always giving you more ideas than you have time to get around to writing.
Absolutely.
So Dale, was this your idea for the topic today?
Yeah, that was the notion of how ideas collide and create new things. Yeah, that was mine.
Okay. And okay, I can't believe you're not a cop. I would have bet my life, because I saw the emblem on the thing. But the randomness is so. I think it's perfect for a pantser. Like, this topic I could talk about all day, because when I sit down, I keep telling Andy, oh, I'm outlining today. Yes, yes, sir. I'm outlining. You'd be proud of me, Andy. And then like a day, it's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it.
I'm an inveterate planner. I plan and plan. I plan right into the ground, and it always ends up changing in the process anyway.
Like, how much?
I would say the final thing I end up with is usually 30 to 40% different than what I set out to do with the outline.
Okay.
And usually it won't change the overall basic shape and arc of things, but I might find, a good example is in First Watch, the first Fifth Ward book. There was an entire character who ends up being sort of a secondary villain in the story, who wasn't even there in the first draft. But after I got the first draft done, I was looking at it, and it was literally like the story and the world, it had this vacuum in it. And I was like, something needs to go there. And I finally hit upon, oh, it needs to be this. And lo and behold, it all works out. So I find I think with me, the planning is just a confidence thing. It's like giving me the roadmap.
Yep.
And I can always veer off of the roadmap if I choose to, but it helps to have the roadmap. It makes me feel better about getting started and pushing through. And it also means that if I ever get stuck, I can always look and go, oh, wait, no, I got to get back here. This is the place where I left the road. I got to get back on that road again.
Yeah, that's exactly the same way I structure it. It's sort of like a framework for a building. At the end of the day, the tile color may change. You make it different appliances depending on what's available, but the framework of the house that you've built still looks the same as it did in the architectural plans, essentially.
Yeah. And it because of that, it drives me crazy when I have an idea that feels like something that I'm really jazzed about. Like I want to do this, but I feel like I can't quite get the foundation and the load bearing parts of the house in the right place.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's like, oh, what am I missing here? What's not working? What's making this thing not click? And I can't start until I figure that out.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. And you know what I do? I just throw it in anyway. Like the character got murdered and a ring went missing, right? I had no intention of writing that in. And so I was like, all right, now what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
And by the end of the book that I'm working on now, the light bulb moment was just like, boom. I know how the series is ending thanks to that missing ring. Like it was just, I put it in there because it felt like what I needed to do at the time. And then I ruminated on it and I kept thinking, all right, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it turned out so perfect because it serves the purpose for pointing to the person who murdered him and then the finale of the book. And so that's what I just always throw it in there and figure it out. It's kind of how I've approached my entire career as an author.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like when actors talk about, they want to learn their lines and learn their marks, because if they get that mundane stuff locked down, then that means in the moment when they're doing the scene, they're open to the random stuff. Then they're open to the cool way they can interact with the other actor, or this cool piece of physical business they can do, or whatever. So I think of it that way. It's like if I lock down the mundane stuff in an outline before I get started, then that means that as I go along, when I find weird little things, that it's like, oh, okay, I'll put that in there. I may not know what it means, like you're talking about, but I feel confident enough that, like, I know where I'm going. I'll throw this in. Maybe I can use it. Maybe I can't.
Yeah.
And you see where it goes. So I'm assuming then that, Andy, you are the planner and Stevie, you are the pantser.
I plan enough for the both of us.
Yeah, actually. And if things go bad with me and I write myself into a locked room, I just go to Andy. Like, yeah, Andy, fix this for me, will you?
Yeah.
No, but I have gotten good at just all doors are open. I have, the big thing is, now this has been difficult for me as a pantser, and that is because the author said so stuff. I hate that. I hate because the author said so.
Yeah.
Somebody said that in the Four Territories, made me aware of it. And now I'm actually very subconscious about it. So I make sure that anytime I want to use like a wizard's powers, that you see them in a book before, or at least 200 pages before.
Yeah.
And it took a struggle to get that power.
Yeah.
Not this, oh, I always had this power.
Yeah, you can get away with almost anything if you lay a foundation for it and foreshadow it.
Yep.
And but if you don't, then you're counting on, is the audience with me, or am I cheating a little bit? I don't know.
And I don't like the fudge. Like, I'll fudge in my D&D campaigns when I do get to play them, because I don't plan anything with my D&D campaigns, but I'll fudge a little bit if I want to keep characters alive. But I try really hard not to fudge in the stories. But you guys, I feel like, wouldn't have a problem writing into a wall, and you can always go back to the outline, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I hope, anyway.
R.J. Barker was the first author I ever met that pantsed his first, pants a series that got picked up by a trad pub.
Yeah, I have communicated with RJ some, and because we debuted the same year and we were both with Orbit, and I read
Age of
Was it
Assassins?
Age of Assassins was the
Yes.
first one?
Yes.
I read that and it was so good.
Yes, it's
And
very
I
good.
contacted him, I'm like, "Oh my god, man, this is so awesome. I loved this book." And I'm like, I wanna hear about your process. What do you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I just sort of make it up as I go along." And I'm like, "Ah, I hate
I
you."
know. And you know, Andy, didn't he do it in like 2 weeks or something insane? 3? Oh, 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was some
3 weeks.
insane.
Excuse me.
It's just
Uh,
crazy. That guy, he's so incredible, and he's a great human
awesome guy.
being too.
He
On top of
is.
that,
You should he has pictures of his kids or his kid, and like it's just like him. You know, he wears like I don't remember if he had a boy or girl, but just wears the punk shirts and stuff. And it's just RJ is so cool.
yeah.
We should actually have you and RJ on the same podcast. That would be
Oh gosh,
awesome. That would be a lot of fun.
he's way cooler than I am, though. I
Yeah.
think I'd get lost in the corner on that one.
I have to say, your T-shirt, it's the Aztec calendar, no?
It is, but if you take a look, it's got Cthulhu in the middle of it.
Nice.
So
I was actually curious about the shirt too.
yeah, no, yeah, that's the I found this at a Comic-Con years ago,
Awesome.
and I was instantly, and it was right after, incidentally, I was finishing up writing a book that was set during the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs,
Awesome.
which still has never found a publishing home.
Are you like are you pretty good with that stuff?
I love history in general, and I when I get it in my head that I want to write a book about a certain time or a certain place, I'll just dive in. And yeah, I spent like 5 years writing that thing.
You sound like Andy like a whole lot right now because Andy is the research king.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine once told me that I am basically just an inveterate researcher who writes stories to put his research in.
Right?
That's cool. That is cool.
But yeah, no, the Aztec thing was and what was really funny with that, speaking of random plus random, I was actually circling around a totally different project that was going to be set in the modern day. It was sort of a revisitation of something I had worked on when I was young, and I was trying to, as an adult, to sort of revisit it and bring it up to snuff. And I literally just wanted to create this one character who was like immortal and who had been so since the time of the Aztecs. And so I was like, oh, I guess I better read up on that. So I grabbed one book and I started reading this one book. It was one of those like Time Life ones, the sort of big prestige volumes that are heavily illustrated and stuff like that. But I started reading that thing. I read it in a weekend and it was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of great stuff here. So the next thing I know, I'm like cramming all these Aztec things. And 5 years later, I had a book about Aztecs.
So the Aztecs, they were the ones that would chop the heads off and run it down, or was that the Mayans?
Although the Mayans did that too. The Mayans did that too. The Aztecs and the Mayans, they were both in Mexico. The Mayans kind of came first, and they were already on the wane and at the back end of their golden ages and whatnot by the time the Aztecs came along. But yeah, that's actually a motif you see in a lot of Mesoamerican cultures. They'll have either mounds or pyramids. They do all of their rituals on top of those mounds and pyramids, and they usually involve human sacrifice of some sort.
Now, were these slaves that they killed rather than their own?
No, they would have they had wars, but they were intended to be wars for taking prisoners. And there was a heavy element of almost like performance to it. Like two different city states or whatever would decide, okay, we're going to meet on this place at this time and we're going to have a battle. Mm-hmm. And they'd go and they'd meet and they'd have a battle. But the point was not to kill anybody. The point was to take as many prisoners as you could. And then the winners would bring all those prisoners back to their home city and set them up for sacrifice.
Do you know if it was like a single chop or was it like sawing or?
Usually the typical one was the victim would be laid down over a stone with their chest arcing up in the air. And the priest had they had knives made of flint. And they would make an incision right below the rib cage, reach in, pull out the heart, and then chop the head off.
Made of obsidian, no? That was
Obsidian, yes. Flint or Obsidian, either one. Both of which incredibly sharp.
Yeah, I went to actually to the museum a number of times where that Aztec calendar is on display.
Oh, in Mexico City. Yeah.
And so they actually show the ceremonial daggers that were used, and they explained how obsidian is, as far as I know, is the only metal sharp enough to cut between molecules.
Well, and it's technically glass. It's that's basically on Game of Thrones. That's what dragon glass is obsidian.
It's igneous, right? It's volcanic.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, they were really good at using it for that. Just like they had swords that were basically, they almost looked like cricket bats. They were these long flat things made of wood, and then they would line the edges with obsidian.
Yeah, they'd like embed it into the sides of the cricket bat. So it would be like a sword club. They were pretty badass and brutal in their own way.
They were. Well, and one of the research things I found when I was doing all that was one of the like History Channel or something. They had a show where they were trying to recreate the sacrifice. And they had a cardiologist. They gave him this obsidian knife, and they had a ballistics, like an entire mock-up of a trunk. And they told him to go. He first tried to saw through the rib cage to get to the heart that way, and that didn't work. It was taking forever. So then he tried the incision under the rib cage and reaching in, and that allowed him to remove the heart in something like 8 seconds or something like that. It was crazy. But again, that's the kind of thing that when you can see the real world application of the stuff that you only read about in books, it informs what you do and how you write about it. And I still really love that book, but I've never been able to find a buyer for it because it's pretty dark. It's basically a vampire story set during the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs. It's kind of patterned on Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now, whichever one you prefer. And it's constantly playing off like the horror of these ancient bloodthirsty gods with the horrors of these mortals who just want to like slaughter and kill each other for gold. And as my agent once said to me, she's like, yeah, people don't really get into the whole genocide thing.
Here's what you should do. Cheat. Change Spanish conquistador to fantasy warrior name, and then Aztec to fantasy name.
Don't think that hasn't occurred to me. That still might happen one of these days. Because you get into a headspace trying to tell a certain story and absorbing a lot of information, and you spend a lot of time there. And then if you're not able to do anything with it, it feels kind of like wasted time. Not just the writing of the book, but literally just the knowledge you then have.
Yeah, totally.
And you want to find a way that even if you're not going to rewrite the book, you want to find a way to repurpose the knowledge.
Yeah.
So
I would, if it was me, I would just do that. I would basically take the entire novel as it is and just change the names to fantasy kingdoms, and you can even use it to sort of showcase the differences in the cultures, and like basically explain real life in a way that people aren't going to feel preached at. That's what makes fantasy so awesome, is that you can show real life things, good, bad.
Yeah.
And people won't be personally attacked or offended by it.
And it frees you up too. It allows you to, if you're the type of person like me who really gets into history and you're trying to meld your fiction with history, then you're actually incorporating real characters that were real people. And it's like your own level of stress about how closely you're going to hew to the facts of things can sometimes mess with you and kind of strangle your story. So yeah, that's another good reason to just go, well, just make it be its own thing. Like Guy Gavriel Kay, he basically does what he does for that reason. Because he doesn't like altering known history, so he'd rather do something that's heavily evocative of it, but still independent.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, the book that I'm writing now is basically Roman Legion versus giant Vikings. Like everything It's literally taken from the pages of history. All of the names are taken from the Norse language. I'm using a dictionary to come up with all the names that have meanings that I can actually point out. The tactics are based on Roman tactics, but then also, taking more advanced. It's just like, it's so much fun to play with that, because then it feels real to people who read it.
Yes, exactly. And it's even more important in a fantasy. A certain amount of realism is more important in fantasy, because that's what makes people invest in it. If you're going to buy the dragons, then you also have to see that, people still have to have farms, and they still have to grow food, and they still have to find a way to move that food around. It's one thing informs the other.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing that a lot of authors don't do, or they don't even understand, is just the basics of economy.
Yeah.
And I won't say that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination.
I won't either.
But anything as simple as how much money is a lot in your world,
Precisely.
Or something like, so where do people live? Do you have the tanneries next door to the smiths, next door to the artists? Or, just the stuff like that you as a normal human being would never think about, but you as the creator of this world have to think about. And you may never write it in to the story. It may never show up.
But it's got to be there. Got to be here.
You think about it, unless you've got to be conscious of it, cognizant of it, or else your story lacks that small degree of genuineness.
Yeah, definitely. Stevie, you're awfully quiet over there.
No, I'm just listening to what y'all have to say. I mean, economics was definitely probably my most hated class in school.
No.
I hated it because it was so subjective. But I know what we're talking about now. Like, I actually have we actually have to end the podcast pretty soon, but I have trouble coming up with a currency for my books. But Andy has been the inspiration a lot for the currencies that I've put into my books, and actually religion as well.
It's like one golden Andy, two golden Andys. Is that the currency that you work with?
Yes, pelicans actually.
You want to know something, Andy? The silver coins in the Fifth Ward are actually called Andys.
Oh yeah, why?
Yeah. Are you serious?
It goes back to I was cribbing from a language I had created for an older book that I never really wrote, and somewhere along the way, I had decided that the silver coins were like moons, and the word for moon in that language was like Andare or something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, I just started calling them Andes. And again, it's a thing that I don't explain in any way, shape, or form, but it just happened. So that's what I stuck with.
One of the most interesting uses of that is in Michael J. Sullivan's, I think it's Age of Legends. I don't remember the name of this, first Age or whatever that series is called.
The Rhaenyra ones, or
no, it's the prequel to Rhaenyra. Set like thousands of years beforehand. And so what he does, like he explains the origin of book. Yeah. Where this character creates, this bound together thing of pages, and it happens to come from book pine, which is the name of a tree. So it goes from the book pine scribblings of whatever the character's name is to book. Like it just gets shortened. Or they have iron, or they have bronze, and they steal the idea for steel making from someone else. So the name steel is literally steal, like it's stolen. And it's just like the way he uses it, it's so small and so subtle until it's actually done. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. That's so cool that you came up with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool. I can't believe the time went by so fast. Holy cow.
We have these every once in a while. The discussion topic is so interesting, or Stevie takes us off on such a long tangent.
I have been good today.
I know you were.
I know. No, we can't blame this on Stevie.
Don't blame it on the dog. Don't blame it on the dog. Except I do feel bad for the rape and AIDS part. Dale, you seem like a very mature man, and you should. I feel like my editor is gonna find the one Fantasy Fiends episode she's gonna watch this one. And so I love you. I'll just.
What's wrong? It's okay. I understand. I understand.
But Dale, dude, where can people find you?
They can find me. I'm on Facebook. You can find me on there. I have both a personal page and an author page. You'll know the author page because it's got a black and white photo on it. But that's the best way to start with me. I'm also on Twitter. Let me pull up my Twitter handle here because I don't have it right in front of me. As at Dale Lucas with a capital D and a capital L 114 is where you can find me on Twitter. And that's about it. I hang out on Twitter. I hang out on Facebook. I just started doing Instagram, but I'm still sort of getting that under my feet. So my Instagram posts are not terribly exciting at this point.
That's awesome. And of course, your books are available on Amazon.
My books are available everywhere that fine literature is sold. You can find them at Barnes & Noble or any other local bookstore. You can find them on Amazon or any other online bookseller. I'm especially fond of the audiobooks read by the great Simon Vance, who I'm a huge fan of.
Simon Vance does R.J. Barker's too, no?
No, it's somebody else who does RJ's. The guy who does RJ's is fantastic, though.
I'm listening to Age of Assassins now, actually.
He's really good. Funny story. I actually, when they asked me about a reader, I said, oh, well, I'm a big fan of Simon Vance. Somebody like him would be great. But I was thinking, whatever, they're not going to get Simon Vance. They got Simon Vance. So
that's awesome.
That made me pretty happy. They're available all over the place. So
awesome. And I'll have a link in the description below. If you do purchase through the link, you are supporting the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We really appreciate that. And also you can subscribe and like too. That really helps us out. Dale, thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get to the reading today, but you're such an awesome guest. We got to have you back on.
That's cool. That's cool. I'd be happy to. I had a wonderful time, guys.
As soon as you know the date for your next release, we'll have you back on.
Sweet.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, Andy, can I go ahead and close this bad boy out?
Go ahead and close it off.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you, sexy guys, so much for being with us and forgiving me and my crudeness. We love you all. I will be on next Thursday for my very own podcast for the Bizarre Blades.
Yeah, we're going to be talking all about Stevie.
Yes,
wow.
All about me for once. No, the podcast is usually about me.
Prepare for that episode to go terribly, terribly off the rails.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Follow me on Collier's Conquers, my group, because June 9th, I am doing a photo shoot for somebody we had on the podcast. I will be shirtless and in a kilt for the first time. I've never worn a kilt before. So, and I'm going to have to shave my beard. But yeah, I'm going to be on a book cover for a romance. So cool. I think. I don't know yet. Anyway, Dale's like, who the hell is this guy?
No, man, that's awesome. That's so cool.
Thank you so much, Dale, for being with us.
No problem. You guys have a good one.
Yes, guys, have a great night, and we'll see you next week for my own podcast. We love you all. Thank you so much.
We will be back tomorrow night with our regularly scheduled program.
Man, I am just the worst presenter ever. But anyway, good night, guys. Thank you so much.